Righto, awesome. Thanks, Mary. And thanks. I'll reiterate all those thanks, but Stonio's team, good friends, colleagues of ours at NextGen since I first moved over here 11 years ago. I think I got invited to Christmas about 2 years after that. Really good family friends, and so it's great to be here today. It's also great to be doing this today with the NZM team. Again, I moved to New Zealand because of NZM, so we've got that. That's the reason I've ended up here, and we've stayed good collaborators all the way through since leaving that team. So awesome to be running today in conjunction with those guys, and a big thanks to all the sponsors. Great to have MSD here who sponsor the podcast. And I'll forget some, so I won't go through them individually, but awesome to have that to support today, and mostly thanks to you guys for taking a day out of your lives to come and learn something, or at least have a chat. It's all about the network that we create on days like this. Just back from LambX in Australia last week, 1,500 people in the room talking about the sheep industry. Awesome event, and the best thing about that event was the networks. And so while today's a little bit smaller scale than that, the networking and the chats that we have are the most important bit. We're throwing a bit of information at you, but it's really just to get you thinking, and the opportunity to talk to different people on different farms and explore different ways of doing things. That's what today is all about. So I'm going to start off with a bit of a presentation as a bit of a scene setter, and then, as Mary said, how the rest will roll. Some of the more practical stuff. This will be a bit more theoretical, which is the last thing you want. But anyway, we'll go into practical for the rest of the day. Pretty much, this is the only stuff you're going to be jammed theory in front of you. But it's not stuff that's particularly brand new. You should have a bit of a grounding in it. So thanks to the Stonio's team. We've thanked you 3 times and you weren't here, mate. But we'll So we'll get underway. What do you reckon that number is? No, that's the average number of days you've got on the planet. So luckily for you guys, you've got lots of them left. For some of us up the front here, we're starting to churn through them a bit. The reason I'm putting that up in there is because we kind of think that time is infinite, that we've got all the time in the world, but in reality, that's how many days we've got. And the older you are, the less days we've got. And so I'm down in this sort of range, starting to crank through some of those 30,000 days. So we haven't got forever. We've got to really get on with the game. Agriculture is a fantastic industry to be involved with, and you've made great life choices so far to be here today. But the opportunities that are going to present in the next years for you are going to be awesome, and you've got to make the most of them because we're all going to end up going out the other end. There's nothing surer than that, and so how we use those days is really important, and great to be together today to try and make the most of one of them. We spend heaps of our time talking about things that we have no ability to change: the weather, the government, all sorts of stuff that we hear, all interest rates, everything that we have individually have no control over, and so there's bits and stuff that are going to happen to us, but how you react to those things that happen is the really key thing that you get to control. So life throws crap at you and awesome things at you, and you're never quite sure which one's coming next, and you can have a great day followed by a really crap day, but it's that space between when something happens and how you react to it is really key. And so we're going to do a bit of mindset-y stuff to start with, and then get into some practical. But consider next time you're whinging about something, or you're in a group of mates sort of just crapping on about how bad life is, just stop and think about how you're going to react to that moment rather than just join the chorus of people whinging about stuff. There's a little book by Dr. Spencer Johnson, which is it's a really easy read. I'm not very good at reading. I like to listen to books instead of reading, but it's a really easy read, and it's all about how when you change what you believe, you change what you do. And that's in agriculture. We're in this nexus, and you are the next generation, and you'll be pushing older people out of the road as you go through your careers, and that's really key to how this industry needs to roll. There's a bit of a saying that a friend of mine says, which is change happens one funeral at a time, but that was meant to be a joke, but we'll work on the humour. But you really need to think about the thing that until you believe that something will happen, there's no way it will happen. And so it's all about how you change your mindset about how you want to run your careers, what you think is possible, is all everything becomes possible if you believe it actually will. And I know that sounds like some sort of hogwash crap, but the reality is that the subconscious brain is amazingly powerful. If you give it a goal, give it some tools, and it's amazing how opportunities start coming in front of you because you've got something in mind. If you just cruise along and just follow whatever's happening, follow your partner because they've got a job somewhere else or whatever, you actually need to be really purposeful about the decisions you make, and I think that's really important. I don't reckon the future is that hard to predict. We know the trends that we're all facing. We know that we're going to get more government intervention in ag. We know that the climate's getting a bit tricky. We know what's going to happen. So you need to act now because you know what that future is. So don't sit back and wait for it to happen to you. You've got the opportunity to be part of that future. And I think it's in my mind, this is while it seems like a tough time to get into ag with tough interest rates, cost of production's up. A lot of things are hard, but I think in terms of the innovation and the technology that's coming into our industry, this is the best time you could possibly be in the game. And yeah, I reckon the next 10, 20 years are going to be really, really awesome in the livestock industry. So saddle up and get into that future. Right, that's enough of a bit of a rev up. Hopefully that's had some impact on you. But the point of that was to really open your minds and be here today to think differently, talk differently, do differently. Don't just be here today talking about the same stuff you were talking about yesterday. In terms of our sheep production system, so getting into a bit of theory, we're developing OptiEwe, which is sort of our repackaging of the services that we offer farmers. We've been very heavily focused in genetics at NextGen Agri. We're going broader than that to meet the need that we see in the industry. And because while we love genetics and the power of breeding, there's other stuff that impact on a sheep business as well, or on a livestock business. Obviously, and we're going to cover some of these and just go through them briefly, and just cover through the details. But I guess the core things are at the centre there. Innovation is the only way we get ahead of cost of production changes. The only way we can actually keep ahead of our costs increasing is to innovate, to be better than yesterday. Welfare is really, really important, both human and animal. New Zealand Merino lead the market in terms of bringing welfare into the marketing of product, and that's really important. And then our job really is as ag people is to improve our efficiencies and be always getting better and getting more from less is really, really important. So if we go into nutrition and health, and I'm going to go through the sort of practical of this when we get down in the yards. Will's not here, he's trying to die from COVID. So you've got me twice. But we'll talk about nutrition down there, and the MSD team will talk a bit about health, or they're talking lice today, but I'm sure can answer questions on other stuff as well. I think on a sheep business, and this is going to be fairly sheep dominant because we're on a sheep and beef farm, but I'm fairly sheep dominant on this particular talk. I think we underestimate how important our young ewes are on farm. I'll talk a bit of that down in the race, but and some of this you might not have control over, but some of it you will. We need to really get those young ewes cranked up. Any farm that we work with that focuses on those young ewes, and I don't know if your ewe lambs are into your ewe hoggets are in today or not, but Charlie's absolutely done a sterling job with the hoggets this year. And when you set them up for that cracking start, the outcome just snowballs across that production bit. And so often we see young ewes sort of hitting the ram, kind of just getting there in time, or people go out a month before they go into the ram and kind of try and feed them a bit of barley or lift them up. It's a really long game to get those ewes to hit their mark. If you're mating ewe hoggets, it's a fairly short sprint to get them up to that weight. But if you're mating them at 19 months to a lamb at 2 years, you've got a longer period. But they do get put on the back burner a bit because they're not a priority mob, because you're trying to finish a lamb to get some cash, or you've got a pregnant mixed age ewe that you're trying to look after. And those young girls tend to get bushed out the back a bit. And we hear that a lot. And so try to change that mentality that they're more important than getting an extra kilo on a sale lamb, because you set these up for the future forever. So they're a really important mob, but I think the most important mob on a sheep farm are your pregnant ewes. And so right now, everyone, if they're working on a farm, will be managing some pregnant ewes. hopefully you're managing them separately in their single, twins, and triplet mobs. But they are the most important things, particularly our multiples that are skinny. This year is probably the toughest that some people have seen for a while, so there's going to be lots of skinny twin ewes around. This year is probably tougher than most to try and do much about that. A lot of the levers that you would normally pull have gone because we've had like a failed autumn, and so all bets are a little bit off this year. But in a normal year, there's lots of opportunity to better feed our twin bearing ewes, and as a rule, we underdo this job. We kind of and we hit lambing 0.2, 0.3 condition score units just short of where we should be on our multiples. Singles they can hit 2.7 condition score, and we'll go through that down in the yards. They can be a bit lighter, but our twins need to be over condition score 3 to really maximise that lamb survival opportunity. And often we miss that mark, and there's a lot of and we do that because we're not monitoring those sheep closely enough, and that's something that we're pretty passionate about. If you all would have heard about condition scoring, we're going to talk about it again. We've been talking about it for 50 years. People still don't do it. But once you get into the mindset that you're actually driving lamb survival, lamb birth weight, the condition score becomes really important in a sheep business. And how many people routinely condition score on the farms they work on? Oh, we've got a few. Good. Oh, we're winning today. That's awesome. All right, cool. So yeah, awesome. So hats off to those that are doing it, because it's really, really important. Because I guess it's worth. Often I think that we just kind of think ewes are magic, and you put them in there, and then lambs turn up. But it's worth just thinking about what is the consequence of underfeeding a ewe. Like, what are we actually doing when we're doing that? And so, thinking about the priority that we've got in a ewe of amino acids and carbohydrates, which are coming out of feed stuff into the bloodstream, and the priority of different things. So obviously the first priority for that ewe is keeping her brain and nervous system ticking over. But the next biggest priority is that placenta and fetus growing. And so if we're not feeding enough amino acids and carbohydrates down the tube and not getting into the bloodstream, then we're starting to burn off muscle and fat, and well, we're not much bone normally, but muscle and fat getting burned off. So she's getting skinny because that placenta and fetus is being prioritized, and that is kind of how nature's evolved, and that's what we want. We want them to be looking after that fetus so we can get that lamb out and surviving. But if she hits that as we go through, these all get burnt out if we are not providing enough nutrients, and so eventually we're not getting enough nutrients into the placenta and fetus, and so we get a reduction in lamb birth weight. And reduction in lamb birth weight equals basically a lamb that's less viable. So you get, on a good day, on a relatively calm day like today, most lambs are going to survive. We all know that New Zealand doesn't always have days that aren't blowing wind and freezing cold and hail and snow. And so birth weight is a protector against that weather. So in a good year, on a good day, any lamb survives, but on a tough day, those light ones will die. And we've only got like this little 60-day window. We've actually got to control our pregnancy. There's only a short period of time. Control our nutrition up to about day 80 odd. You're growing a bit of placenta, but the fetus is not growing much. But in that last 2 months, which is straight out of the preg scanning crate, you've got this massive growth sprint that the lamb the fetus is on. And if you've got one in there, it'll do that okay. If you've got two in there, that's the battle if you're not providing enough nutrients. So always think about what's going on in those ewes. Once they've been preg scanned, you've got a lamb in there that's trying to do a couple of 100 grams a day inside mum. And if you're not feeding enough, if we're not providing enough nutrition, then we're gonna impact on birth weight. And yeah, obviously the outcome of that is that low birth weight and then that equals low survival. Anyone got skinny twin bearing ewes at home? Everybody? Yeah. And that's going to be the reality this year. And we would love to have places to hide them or feed them, but it's going to be a tough year this year. And all we can hope for is a mild spring and mild lambing. But in a more normal year, we can prioritise feed towards those twins, because if they're running in the same mob, or if we're not, and particularly the skinny twins that have the opportunity, it's about $1.20, $1.30 per kilogram dry matter you can make by getting skinny twins lifted up, getting a bit of weight on a skinny twin. So it's like grazing dairy cows almost in terms of the price you can get, the value you can get out of that grass by feeding a skinny twin. So any questions on nutrition? We'll do more on the yard, so I won't ask the questions because you're not going to ask them anyway. But are there any questions? Sorry, I'll stick to the guns. No, cool. Right, we'll get into genetics and breeding, which is a bit more good-looking bloke there. Yeah. If we talk on, I guess in the industry, you're going to have a variety of opinions, and you'll have your own formed by your parents maybe, or the people you work with, and there's a lot of stories around whether breeding values work or they don't, and you can't afford to be a non-believer in breeding values in your careers. Like that's pretty much as straightforward as it is. You're too young. You've got too much opportunity to spend the next 20 years arguing with that science works. Like the sun's going to come up tomorrow and breeding values are going to work. That's as simple as it is. So for those of you who might not be in that mindset yet, I just wanted to go through what happens, like why we need a breeding value to predict the DNA outcome of a sheep or a bull, or a ram or a bull. And it's because not everything what we see when we're looking at a bull or a ram is genetic, and in fact most of it is not genetic. And so that's the kind of old adage that 90% of the breeding goes down their throat. It's more like 70%. 70% of what we see is nutrition, 30% is DNA or genetics across, on average, across all the different traits. And so when we're buying a ram or buying a bull, we're looking at the outcome of lots of nutrition and environment and a little bit of DNA. And so all the things that could impact on what a ram looks like on sale day is, has he been a bit crook? In Australia, they crazy enough to put them in sheds and feed them up, which is just nuts. But even if you think about the bull game here, you've got bulls fed, like force fed almost, to get massive sale weight. And so they're not housed, but they are artificially raised and pushed. And so we're masking a lot of things. In sheep, obviously, single, twin, or triplet has a massive impact on what they look like, how they'll measure, how much they've been fed, grazing conditions. Are they running around on the coast of 1,000 mil rainfall, or are they in central Otago on 300 mil rainfall without much worm burden? Impact of rainfall on wool quality. How old was mum? So is it a ewe hogget or a normal two-tooth or an adult dam? That all impacts lots of things about how that ram will look and how that bull will look as well, and where they were born in the drop. So firstborn versus lastborn, and then finally genetics. So lots of that stuff you don't take home. All you take home is literally the swingers between the legs, and the DNA is all that is of value in that bull or ram. But we spend a lot of time fantasizing about how amazing that particular animal is, or those animals are, and we have lots of people thinking that computers can't breed sheep and all that sort of crap. All the computer's trying to do is take out all the stuff that isn't genetic, and so that's the role of an EBV in the industry. And so that should say EBV. That's in Australia we call them ASBVs because they had to be different. But EBV cuts it down into just the genetics. So this stuff all gets knocked out by genetic linkage. So grazing conditions, rainfall, feeding, how that animal was grazed is all knocked out by using rams or bulls in common across different herds and flocks. And that's called linkage or connectedness, depending on which database you're looking at. And that's really important. So that's how we can compare a ram that's born in Australia today versus one that's been born here at Stonyhurst. Through breeding values, I can compare them exactly, apples with apples, because there's been enough shared genetics across those different flocks. And that's how we roll as an industry. There's these little bridges of genetics, and it's happening millions of times. And so that's how we can compare across different environments, and it's really powerful. We then knock out these fixed effects, single, twin, triplet, how old mum was, whether they're born late in the drop. That all gets corrected for in the analysis. And then we use DNA to tidy up our not knowing who's related to who, plus pedigree or either pedigree or DNA or both in some cases, to really understand the genetic component of what's going on. And then we measure the traits. And so there's a whole heap of information being pulled into one. And so we might be looking at a weaning weight, and you might have weaned at 35 kilos, that ram. but you don't know whether it's 35 kilos because it was out of a mixed age ewe, or is it a single, is it a twin? How old was mum? What's it been fed like? The beauty of looking at a breeding value, so maybe a 4 or 5 for weaning weight for that breeding value, means that all this crap has gone out, and that's just what you take home. You're taking home the EBV or the DNA, and so that's really powerful. And again, we don't have any room for people arguing with EBVs at your age. You're way too young for that. They work really, really well. When we think about genetics, often we think about this one. How do we make money out of when we're buying that bull or that ram? We're looking at that maybe a growth trait, because that's the closest thing to making money for us. Or we might be looking at reproduction because we want more lambs coming out of them, or depending on what the breeding objective is. The way we think about it is to be a bit broader than that and think about, I guess these ones are, and particularly in the merino game where labour and health has been the biggest challenge. The opportunity to save money and save time through genetics is amazing. So we've been working for 11 years here on health traits at Stonyhurst, and kicking some real goals now around feet, seeing big shifts in dags, big shifts in worms, because we've focused on the save your time and save your money traits, as well as the make your money traits. And then there's the last one, which is sort of I got added after I started working for New Zealand Merino, was the concept of actually looking at where the hell is this product going anyway. So we're actually we're not just producing to shove it on a truck. It's actually being produced for a customer somewhere, and often that's a global customer. And I've chosen those words really carefully to delight a customer, not just to give it to a customer. It's got to be something that fits the bill. And so for meat, that might be intramuscular fat, IMF. For wool, that might be micron, or depending on which customer that is. But you've got to meet an icebreaker contract, so it has to be a particular micron. So that's for a reason, because how that garment's going to perform down the track. So when we're thinking about genetics, whether it's buying a bull or buying a ram, really important that we're thinking holistically. We're not just going, well, we want them to grow fast. Yeah, we might want them to grow fast, but we also don't want to be dagging sheep forever, because eventually you people will stop doing that job, or it's not the best job in the world. And we have massive power to control all that stuff. Everything that you hate about sheep farming is under genetic control. All the shit jobs all have some component of genetics in them. And so it amazes me that for 200 years we've been breeding sheep, and yet we've still got dags, knowing that dag is 20-30% heritable. And literally when you get the breeding value right for dags, they stop having dags. It's bloody amazing. And yeah, it's amazing that we've focused on other traits and we haven't worried about the health traits. And that's because there's been heaps of young people in the industry that were willing to be paid bugger all and do the jobs, but that's getting harder and harder. The cost of labour, everything is changing, as you know. When we start with a new client, we often want to baseline where we're at. In the merino game, we've got something called a flock profile test, really powerful, or fine wool game. So DNA sample from 20 sheep can tell us the average of the flock, so tell us where we're at, because lots of different, in genetics, you don't know what you're looking at. Genetics and environment together. So at Stonyhurst, we can see a ewe, and is it because she lives at Stonyhurst, or is it because it's Stonyhurst genetics as she looks like she does today? So you can never tell the difference between your management and your genetics often. A flock profile test is really awesome at telling you where you're good and where you're not. So if you're in the final game, that's a real opportunity. Unfortunately, in the rest of the industry, we don't have that. I'm hammering beef and lamb to try and get that available for the major for Romneys and stuff, because I think it's really, really powerful to get the average breeding value of your ewe flock, to know where you're good and where you're not so good. In cattle, you can do that through various things. So PBB roll out a test, so you can do some heifers, and Angus run a different, but you can genotype some heifers and get a similar answer. So there are opportunities in cattle and fine wool sheep, but not in strong wool sheep. But really important, if you're not doing that, you can do things like ram team averages to work out, like if you know where you've been buying your rams, get all the tag numbers, look at their current breeding values, and you'll get a good indication of where you're at as a flock. And then you can look at where that compares to industry averages and where you should be going. And then finally, we're down to, so you've got a breeding plan, you've got your traits sorted out, you've sort of baselined your flock, and then you're working out where you're going next. And so there's kind of a few options there. You're working out what your cut-offs for traits are, what your focus is, and that's something we go through, but you can do that yourself. There's some tools on our website to lead you through that sort of process. Then you're picking whose driveway you're going up. Often it's who you play rugby with or who you're best mates with or whatever. I think you probably need to be a bit better than that with your decision making around ram buying, and maybe that's being hard on you guys. But certainly as an industry, we are a bit crap at using logic to make that decision. There's a fair bit of romance and heart that goes into that decision, and not a lot of brains sometimes. So choose wisely. Choose the people that are measuring the traits that are really important to you. So if you've got 3 or 4 traits that you really want to improve, you want to have someone that's also hammering those traits, because they'll be the ones that are likely to take you forward in that area. And there's horses for courses all over the industry. And then finally get down to that ram selection decision, which is a combination of your eyes and the breeding values. While I was hammering breeding values really hard before, you still have to have a sheep that's functionally and structurally correct, the type that you want to get. And so there's lots of physical stuff happens once you get through all those previous gates. Righto, then, so that's the ram or male end of the game, and then obviously knocking out, you've got the ewes that you're going to keep, and we've got a range of strategies there. Some people get 300 or 400 ways pushing through the drafting gate and whip them off. That's one way. Otherwise, go through with a bit more care and select out. Often, if you've got wool in the picture, you're spending a bit more time looking at that trait. If you're not, then you're often weight and type you'll be looking at. But so strategies around which old ewe should get culled. What's a cull criteria for a ewe? Sorry, dry. Yep. So udder, yep. Sorry, yep. Feet, yep. Teeth, yep. Teeth, yeah. Can't hear, I'm deaf. Spent too long in a nightclub in Adelaide on Friday night. Anything else? We've got bags, teeth. What else do we have? Dry, yep. Scan dry, wet dry. Both of those. Sorry. Wool, yep. So wool might have gone off. So there's heaps of reason to leave the joint. And so we need to have, and people love culling sheep. Like, it's their favourite thing in the world, I reckon. Like, it's mine as well. Putting red rattle on a sheep, red is dead. It's heaps of fun. But we have to make sure we've got good structures around it. One of the things that we probably have, we overdo is knocking out skinny ewes. If we don't know that what she's reared for that ewe, knocking out a skinny ewe that's like at weaning or not long after weaning, she might have just brought in 2 35-kilo lambs and absolutely done the best job of the world for you, and then you're knocking her off because she's a bit skinny. So, be careful on that one. But all the other stuff you either fail for. There's no real room for wet dries and dry ewes, and then all the other structural stuff. If the teeth are failing, then they got to go. So that's all pretty clear. But we have to be a little bit careful about how hard we go, because it is expensive to get a sheep through to first mating, and then if we have to replace it with another one, we have to think about that cost when we're doing that. And then what we're trying to get to do in OptiEwe is to start measuring stuff. So we've been on a few farms, and here when I'm classing young ewes at Stonyhurst, I've got, I don't know how many points of information Charlie throws at me, but a fair few. So we know how old mum was, we know which mob it was out of, we know birth, single or twin born. What else do we know, Charlie? So, it's group it's in. So rather than just and there's lots of times where you go to cull a twin or a twin out of a maiden or whatever, and because you're going, oh, it's a bit off, and then you go, oh, it's a twin out of a maiden, and you go, oh, let it go. And you don't want to be, obviously that doesn't give her a free pass, but it means that you have to be a little bit kinder to her, otherwise you'll knock out. Because if you let yourself run, this is what professional classes in Australia do. These are in merinos, and this is not having a crack at professional classes. This is what any of us would do if we're in the race. This is the lifetime productivity trials out of Australia, and so they've kept these ewes in the flock they didn't cull any right the way through, but they reclassed them each year, but they put them back in. The culls went back in. So for 6 years, because they wanted to measure everything about those sheep, they literally measured everything that happened in those ewes. And you let the professional classes go in their keeper mob. You have 70% singles, and 30% twins. 70% singles and 30% twins. And in their cull mob, you've got 30% singles and 70% twins. So all of your twins are getting biffed into your cull mob if you're not careful of what you're up to. So if you get the opportunity to select ewes, you want to be, and you do know who's a single and twin, and a commercial scenario, it could be just a notch in the ear to draft them out before you do that job, or look at that as you go through that process, because otherwise you'll just keep picking singles out of mixed stage ewes that are born early in the drop are the ones that first get through your drafting gate, and your twins out of your maidens that might have been born sort of midway through the drop, they'll be the ones that are on the truck and going off to someone else or often off to get their heads cut off and sent overseas. But yeah, big opportunity to refine this job, and the more data we put around this job, and so we've got some tools now to correct for single and twin for any weights that we've taken, that sort of stuff, because we need to do this job better, and we haven't, as an industry, done it very well. Any questions, comments? Yeah, no, good question. Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So one is follicle density happens in utero. So secondary follicles are the ones that drive wool production. So you got one primary to about 60 different secondary follicles, and nutrition during pregnancy changes that follicle density. So you get follicle branching, getting into the details, but anyway. So you get more follicle density when you've got a single born. So that's fixed at birth. So you can't feed that back on. If one of those twins drops dead at birth, you can't feed that density back in. So the things that change wool quality, which is, so the singles will be whiter wool, better nourished, slightly finer, and cut more of it, and that's all set at birth. But then body weight itself, you could catch up because it's only around and so it might be, I don't know, 0.3 kilos behind at birth, but it'll catch that up easy enough. So yeah, it could be a big, shiny, well-fed, but the wool quality will still look like a twin. And that's the double whammy on, in non-fine wools, it's obviously just mainly body weight, but in fine wool sheep, you get crapper wool and a smaller animal, which gives you a double chance of getting culled. So we run this, what we call the OptiEwe classing now on Marama Station are the ones that we've sort of led the charge on this. And so rather than just going up the race and putting red rattle on them, having a merry old day on your replacement ewes, we actually go through and score it. This is actually not me, it's Jane and Will, but I have done it as well. But so what we do is on that day, on that classing day, rather than go through and knock off just on what we can see phenotypically, we condition score them on that day because we know that's genetic, particularly in maiden ewes, and we'll talk about that in the yards. We give them a foot structural score, we give them a Paston score, we give them a wool colour score and a fleece rot score. We know who's a single, we know who's a twin, we know their weights, and we know how old they are, or how old mum was, sorry. So all that information gets collected, and then we correct this stuff that we've measured for this stuff, and then knock out. And so rather than trying to make a decision on a whole myriad of information, we actually do that back on a spreadsheet, knowing all the things that we would cull them for. And so that's a shift we're trying to make as an industry. We're just starting out, really. We've got one, as I said, a Marama Station are doing it, and mainly because of how hard Jane's worked to get them to kindle into our line. But this is, I reckon, how we're going to end up as an industry. We're using more data and more information, and the better we get with things like artificial intelligence, some of this stuff will come for free. It'll be scored before we're even looking at the sheep. And so what we've done when we've done that process, we've actually got the same amount of singles kept as amount of twins. We haven't suffered that single twin effect. We've got the same amount we've actually got more out of maiden ewes than we have out of mixed age ewes proportionally, because we've corrected for that stuff and we've gone with the better animals. So lots of power there to do things differently. Obviously you need EID in place to do all that stuff because you've got heaps of different data points coming together to do that. So one of the things that keeps me up at night at the moment is tech, and so we've been developing some cameras to do some stuff, and actually wherever Johnny is, John Douglas Clifford is mostly to blame for half of my crazy ideas. You'll meet John before the day's out, but he was the one that sort of suggested that facial recognition would work in sheep to me, and that sort of ruined the last 5 years of my life because we've been working on that, and he was right, and we are actually matching today. We've got a camera that newer camera than that now, but it's matching lambs to dams in a farm in Cavendish in Victoria. We're doing about 30. One camera's matching sort of 30 odd lambs a day at the moment. Anyway, pretty cool to do what a shepherd could do in terms of, and that's all artificial. So there's 4 or 5 different artificial intelligence algorithms coming together to make decisions and drive a camera. So I think like that's why I'm so excited about livestock, because that's the sort of stuff we're going to be playing with in your careers, and hopefully in the tail end of mine, that we've got massive opportunities. We underuse EID, obviously Stonyhurst, I don't know obviously, but Stonyhurst were really early adopters, I don't know, 20 years of Ag Tracker here. Ag Tracker been playing with these guys for a couple of decades. As soon as EID came out, it was implemented here. And so reams and reams of information here, and we could go on with story after story about the things that Charlie's learnt about the sheep and management and stuff through the power of that EID, which seems like a lot of effort to start off, but the power you get back is enormous. So as an industry, we need to be better than that. In Australia, it's now going to be compulsory, so that our government will be looking pretty hard at it anyway, I imagine, but we'll see. But it is the opportunity to sort of manage the individual within the mob, because obviously we can't treat every animal individually, but we can know what their management needs to be, and at the key times pull them back out again, or pull them out to manage them differently based on that EID information or the information we've gathered. And we in the Marama Station have done that. There's lots of things that you can sit here and tell you that heavier sheep or better conditioned sheep have more lambs, but when you see it on your own flock or in a flock that you're managing, it becomes more powerful to you. So this is just going back and looking at a Marama's data, and it'll be the same here at Stonyhurst. When you look at the condition score they had pre-mating versus how they scanned, as we know, the better condition they are, the better they scan. These are merino ewes. But once you've got that information and you know how responsive your ewes are, you can make a decision about whether it's worth feeding. Like, is it worth trying to feed those ewes up a bit or maintain condition on those ewes a bit better, because I'm going to get an extra 10, 15% of lambs. If they're not that responsive, you know that it's not worth it. So seeing the difference in your sheep, and that tells you that if I actually want to maximise reproduction, I can't afford to have these light ewes in my mob, and I need to work out how I get around that. Other things that EID allow you to do is start to compare across a range of times. So this is now looking across their two-tooth mating versus their scanning as a 3-year-old, so that next mating. So those that scanned single as a 2-year-old at that first mating did 135 the next year. The ones that scanned twins at that same mating did 171 that following year. So things like that tell you what's important in my business, and obviously in all cases the heavier ones had some more lambs as well. So these are things that EID enables you. You can't do that stuff really easily without, there's only so many dots of paint you can put on a sheep and how many tags you can put in it. This stuff is linking a wait period with 2 different scanning periods, and matching them through it. So a whole range of different time points coming together, and really easy in Excel, but really powerful, I think, to see in your own data set. So getting towards summing up, the other thing we'll involve in our OptiEwe groups that we're going to be running is sort of the business end. When we asked a survey recently of what farmers most wanted to know about, it was cost of production. So, and that's probably because they're scared about how high it is. Does anyone know the cost of production of lamb or wool on the farm they're working on? Do the people you work for know the cost of production? No, they don't. I've asked them. It's amazing how little we know about how much it's costing us to produce stuff. We know we're sort of at a macro level. We kind of know that the bank balance is going down or going up. But at a micro level, there's a lot of opportunity in our businesses to really start to hone in on this. And this is probably, I love playing the sort of Kiwi-Australian combo, because I've lived my life on both sides of the ditch. And there's things that Kiwis are better at Australians at, and then there's things that Australians are better than Kiwis at. And that financial acumen around that cost of production, Aussies are definitely got a bit of a lift. There are benchmarking groups in New Zealand, obviously, that do it really well. But I think we do need to start to get, and if you're at Lincoln still, or if you've been there, you will have done economics papers. We just do need to start to bring that thinking in, because we can't. It's really easy to benchmark our production and say, right, we're going to lamb all our ewes a condition score 3.5, we're going to feed the crap out of them, and you'll lose money. Like, we've got to have this balance of what is production benchmarking, which is all the stuff I've been talking about, but it can only be useful if it's done in a way that makes you money. And so we need to work out how do we driving production and how are we reducing costs through genetics, nutrition, and our management to end up in a better place. Because the two parts of a cost to production equation are how many kilos we're producing versus the total cost of inputs to produce that lamb or wool. So we've got two ways we play that game. We either produce more of it or we cut our cost to produce it. And so that's what we've all got to be doing in the businesses that we work in. If we're not working on one end of those two, we're not helping that business be better. We need to be thinking about these things when we're out there. And so there's lots of things we can do here. Mostly, some of them are expensive, so we can just buy another truckload of barley and we'll increase the number of kilos produced. And that's kind of how the dairy industry rolls. You just get more monkey dust and you produce more milk. But for us, obviously the most efficient stuff to use is grass. So how do we build a sheep and build a management system that keeps that cost down and keeps production up? And that's what should keep us all awake at night, because that's our job. Our job is to get more product out of the grass we're going to produce, or optimize that production system to minimize this thing, because this is what's going to send us out the door. If we're producing right now, we're getting, I don't know, what's lamb worth? Not enough, whatever the number is. And yet, so in Aussie, the cost of production is $6.50 on some places per kilogram of lamb. And at times last year, lamb was $4.50. So they're losing $2 for every kilo of lamb they produced. Even my level of economics reckons that's a bad idea. Now it's back at $8 and they're okay. But we do, when times are good, we let a lot of complacency slip into our businesses. We let inefficiency slip into our businesses because lamb is $8, so we can afford to produce it at $7. Whereas it's times like now where we're going, shit, we've got to cut some costs. If we were thinking about this the whole time, we wouldn't get ourselves into some of the problems we get into. Obviously, to do that, planning is key, and you'll be hopefully more, as you get through your careers, you'll be more involved in planning and less involved in doing, or a bit of both probably. But this stuff only happens when we sit down and think about it. It doesn't happen when you're crutching sheep or shifting brakes. It's when you sit down and actually physically force yourself to think about how you're going to do things differently that things happen. I think in all enterprises, doesn't matter what you're running, whether it's a milk bar or a grazing system, it's the small little steps. It's not like you just go from a not using breeding values, not managing condition score, not using EID, all these. So you can have one farm type. You don't just go bang one step to a whole different new farm type. It's made by small steps. And so you don't have to be, you can be sort of deflated about where you're working or something, but you only have to make one tiny step better to make the next day a little bit better. The principle of the Kaizen principle that Toyota deploy, which is basically a systemized way of innovation where everyone in the business is enabled to innovate. But what they can do is turn a failing Ford factory in the US into with the same staff, the same gear, the same everything, can go from something that's losing money to something that's making money through the mindset of the people and through the innovative mindset, and accepting that little tiny small innovations that every individual has the opportunity to make in a business will add up to a shift. And yeah, like the quote that's, if you think that small things can't make a difference, then talk about a sandfly or a mosquito. And the concept of, hopefully we've got someone from Rabo talking to you about finance today, and the reason for that is because of the power of compounding interest. Because the thing that I wish I knew, or wish I'd focused on when I was your age, is the fact that you don't have to put much money away for it to turn into a lot of money. And again, the further you get down your days on the planet, the less time you've got for that compounding interest to kick in. But it's the same in our innovation in our businesses. If you make that's a 0.05% improvement per day. So that's just maybe hanging a gate better or shifting that gate so the sheep run better. You don't need a big change to change a 0.05% difference in a production system. So it can be little things that you can implement, whatever your business is. And if you compound that over time, you end up with massive differences. So the power of getting better makes getting better easier. And always think about, you don't need to make big changes, you just need to be small incremental changes to have an outcome. So we're going to be forming some groups. Hopefully we're going to pilot them. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe later this year, early next year. We're keen to see if we can bring some concepts together. We're not sure. Well, we've got 8 modules we're going to run over 2 years, so keep a lookout for that if you're in a business that might be interested in that. We think there's a lot of power in getting together. What we've seen in lots of parts of my career, when you get 5 or 6 farms working together and learning together, it's way more powerful than this forum. Like you're sort of thinking about what you're going to do on the weekend at the moment. Whereas when you're in 5 or 6 people working together on your businesses, it really works well. So we're going to try and leverage that principle, and it'll be profit focused. But and we'll cover the things we'll cover. That's enough out of me, I reckon. I've got our fine wool. We've got the New Zealand edition. So if you're in the fine wool game and you haven't got a copy of our ram buying guide, come and grab one. If you're in the non-fine wool game, then don't worry about it. We're producing a strong wool one at the moment, so you'll be a month or 2 away. It'll be on our website. And if you want to listen to this voice more, jump on the Head Shepherd podcast. Every Monday we have a yarn about livestock or something around farming. And yeah, that'll do for me. Any questions? What else should I talk about? What else do you want to hear about? Just want to shut up.
I think a question about, you said single born. How do you record that? Do you record that scanning?
Yeah.
There or like going around?
Oh yeah, no. So scanning, yep. So yeah, the thing we don't know with that is obviously who read them. But so some scanners now will record that for you. So Monty, that we do a bit of work with out at Hamish Monteith, who Amarama use, that they get a weight and a preg scan on their file. So at the end of the day, you download that CSV and away you go. Here you record them as they come out of the crate, Charlie. Yeah. Others they might get a dot on their back and you can run them around at the end of the day, or it doesn't have to be done on the day. If you've got a grumpy preg scanner that just wants to get the job done, as long as they stay in their mobs, you can record that information. And then, yeah, the hamstring of that is you don't know who raised twins, you know who was born twins, but it's a way better start than having no knowledge. Yeah. And then we're building, what Jane's doing is, and what Charlie knows as well, is sort of looking back and going, right, she's twin, or she's been early. So those ewes that getting pregnant early and having twins. So starting that when you're actually, so as you get into that future state where you can start culling those animals that have been late with a single for 3 years running or whatever. Yeah, it's a little bit negative. So you whinge at the tag manufacturers. Yeah, so unfortunately you lose data. That's just part of the game. And so if it's on a small scale, on a stud scale, you'll have a backup tag, but in a commercial scale you won't have. You'll just be gone. Often that's another reason to get there. If they're not, then you're sort of going, well, it hasn't got any ID and I don't like it that much, it'll disappear. But often you replace it and you start the data again, but it is a pain. So in terms of management, there's lots of different software out there. We tend to just go into Excel because a lot of the software is as hard to learn as it is to get the information out of. So we're pretty big fans of the True Test gear, so we use a lot of the XR5000 and then going into a spreadsheet if we want to do any more than that, but try and leave as much of that on the box as we can as well. There's lots of different examples of different software trying to do individual ID stuff. It's pretty hard. The software is much better at macro stuff, your mob-based type stuff, like your Farm IQ is doing that stuff really well. The individual stuff has proven pretty hard in the software world. Yeah, I mean, I think you get, I don't know, Charlie might want to answer about the time required for EID. Like you get systems in place where it's not a real burden, or?
Oh, laying land and all that. Quick thing, trying to get away anyway. So, not a big issue.
Yeah. And even things like, you don't have to record that, like at land marking, you don't have to record it's a single or a twin. You just know the tag sequence will went in their ears and get the tag bucket from the manufacturer. Like there's system ways to get around the extra work. There is, I think like probably even 5 years ago, some of the tech would fail every second time, so that got a bit niggly. So that's where you ring these ag track guys and get it fixed. But the systems are getting better, and I think people are getting better at using it. They are pretty intuitive, really. And you're all, if you can't work at your age, you've got to know it. The young ewes, it's as long as they go in at lamb marking. The biggest mistake we make is we put them in it once they've been selected in because we're tight and we don't want to. We don't want to. Not looking at you, but yeah, a lot of people whack them in at when their ewes have been selected, and so then you missed. How old was mum? Well, was she born a single or a twin? So the key bit you can correct for is gone. If you don't get in at lamb marking, or if those mobs don't stay apart until weaning, then you really missed, I reckon, the real value of EID for selection purposes. So you almost, after that, it's then, at that point you can do it in, so this year we can put them in at marking and have very, very useful information to cull on. But the following, it'd take 2 or 3 years to build up on the older girls to, because you can just, if you're culling, it's probably the ones that, it's the subtle stuff. It's the condition scoring and recording the condition score. Is she always skinny? Like the stuff that Charlie finds that, we can take those skinnies off and feed them up. But then if she's back down there again, as soon as she gets an opportunity, then she's got to go, kind of thing. And that's the power you get from the data that you don't get otherwise. And so that takes a few years to build. So I don't think, as far as I know, no one brings them in for a job, for an EID job. They bring them in for other jobs. So it's kind of shearing. And crutching tends to be the 2 condition scoring jobs because one's pre-lamb and one's pre-tup. And so you can get good information on condition score then if you're going to do it individually. And then the rest of it is kind of recording what you're already doing a lot. And then there's definitely that classing day becomes a really intensive measurement day. And so you just run them all through a box and doing everything rather than going up and down the race that we would normally do. But there's a bit of extra work, but we just recorded Jane and Richard Subtle, we did a webinar on Monday, and it's worth listening to, just sort of how they've implemented it at 8,000 ewes, so it's not talking 100 ewes kind of thing. And they just got their labour in and just doing it while they're doing other stuff, basically. Yeah.
What's the cost of that?
So $2-ish. Yeah. Depending on which one you get, and but sort of around that ballpark. Yeah.
Any thoughts, Berg, on a lot of stuff we'll cover today will be new, but a lot of it will be sort of reinforcing what they might have forgotten. But how do we go back to our respective farming, family farming circumstances and try to implement that change at a low to medium stock manager level? Any thoughts around how we can bring that?
Next question. And life is about managing people. It doesn't matter whether you're managing up, managing down, managing sideways. Yeah, getting your own way is going to be the critical skills you get, and the only skills you really need in life. So I don't have the answers, but I do know that, sometimes some people are impossible to change, and you've just got to find them and get another job. But other people are malleable, and so it is. It's about earning respect. I often think sometimes we come in, and I've done this before. You sort of come in before you actually earn your stripes. You start making calls. You kind of got to earn your respect on something early, and then when you get those little opportunities to show your worth, that's when you're up all night learning the new stuff. That's when you're like, if you get slightly ajar door, that's when you just got to barge right through it and do your absolute best and be at your best for that moment, and then demonstrate that value. I know that's all pie in the sky, but there'll be opportunities if your mindset is that this is a shit place to work and they never let me do anything, that's the way it will roll out for you. If your mindset is, I reckon there's a glimmer of hope there somewhere, I reckon, it's amazing how the subconscious brain will change the outcome. That sounds hogwash and crap, I know, but that's how it rolls. But that wasn't a very good answer, but that's an answer. But, yeah. We about done? Yeah. Righto. Thanks very much for turning up again. Awesome to have you here, and look forward to chatting throughout the day. Try and ask some more questions if you can. That'd be great. But we'll talk more. The rest will be more practical and more hands-on.